I'm Dr. Kate Tudor. I am a criminologist at Northumbria University, which is in Newcastle in the northeast of England. I've been there probably about 2.5 years. I've kind of lost track a little bit because of COVID, but I think, yeah, 2.5 years. And before that, I was at Untitled University in the criminology department there. So all in all, I've probably been employed as a criminologist for about 10 years now. And before that, I did a PhD in criminology, which didn't actually relate to rural crime. So that looked at Ponzi schemes and looking at the kind of criminal motivations and criminal subjectivities of those involved in sort of investment fraud. I'm really bad at watching TV, to be honest. I find it really hard to sit still. However, I have recently found some YouTube videos because my watching, like everybody else's, has kind of migrated to those kind of platforms. And I found this young lad who does hiking throughout the world and records them. And his filmmaking is second to none. I think he's called Harmon Hoek. And it's one of the few things in the world that I've actually found that makes me calm and sit still. So I've been watching those recently, but I find that watching TV is a bit like a busman's holiday for criminologists because everything is about crime. But nevertheless, my interests do take me there. So I've got some kind of go-to films that I always go to just to kind of make me happy. So that would be like Little Miss Sunshine, probably Untouchable, and then some like older Italian ones like Romanzo Criminale and Gomorrah and stuff like that. So yeah, all the kind of things that you would expect, and all of the Netflix series that you would probably expect as well. And I've got those same bad habits when it comes to reading things as well. So I have books that I always go back to, and I'm a real sucker for sort of like Albert Camus and Graham Greene. And I keep going back to Our Man in Havana over and over again. And maybe The Moon is Down as well. So yeah, I try to read new things all of the time, and I'm always reading stuff for work, but I always find that when it comes to novels, I always go back to the same stuff over and over again. It's a very bad habit. So how I got into rural crime was probably by chance, to be honest, and childlike curiosity, if I'm totally honest. It was a chance conversation with a friend of ours who was working on a farm over the summer, and the person he was working for had their tractor stolen, and it showed up in Eastern Europe within 2 days on the tracker. And I just thought, how is that possible? And it really, really sparked my interest. And more than anything, I was kind of struck by absolute awe for the people that had actually achieved this, because I couldn't believe that you could take something so huge and take it so far in such a short period of time. And so I just wanted to find out more about it, to be honest. And that's where my interest in rural crime started. So I started a project probably a few years ago now, looking at stolen plant and agricultural machinery and vehicles. And I intended it to be a kind of replication of a previous project I'd done in relation to fraud. So kind of looking at the offender's perspective, looking at the motivations, the criminal subjectivities, the kind of MOs and business models that these people had. And I did that, but what I found was that there were so many issues around sort of impact and victim experience, but then also the policing of this kind of crime, that the remit sort of vastly expanded really quickly. And before I knew it, I was looking at all of these things. And I actually, it took over a year of my life, to be honest, and spiraled out of control. So when I did that, it involved interviewing sort of people who've been involved in stealing plant and ag equipment. And I quickly realized that the kind of vast spectrum of people that were involved in this kind of stuff, from a kind of low-level local scrotes to much higher level, much more organized, international, organized criminals, basically. And so I managed to interview quite a wide spectrum of those offenders. I looked at the policing of it and realized the way that these offenders are routinely kind of identifying and exploiting weaknesses in the policing models that we have, both within individual forces, because in the UK we have 43 different forces, and they all have different systems. They have different, intelligence systems and all of that. And the offenders know this, and they are routinely carrying out cross-border criminality across the different police forces, and they know that police forces don't talk to each other. And I just found this absolutely amazing. And then when I started to look at the international aspect of it, the way that they're able to exploit weaknesses in sort of policing of ports and things like that, it seemed like a no-brainer for them to do this. And it is actually an incredibly lucrative business model that they're involved in. So I've started to look at that on an international scale more recently. So we have a real problem in the UK at the moment of people stealing GPS systems from tractors, you know, the dome systems. And we have large numbers of sort of foreign national offenders involved in that kind of crime that are routinely moving the stuff across Europe continuously using couriers, postal systems, also using sort of like passenger transport and so on and so forth. So I just find all of this kind of stuff really interesting, that the kind of existing networks that are used for ordinary trade and transportation are routinely also used for crime as well. So that's kind of where my interest in rural crime started. More recently, I just carried out a project looking at the levels of involvement of organised criminals in the rural crime problem. So that was a little bit more desk-based rather than going out and interviewing people. So kind of looking at people's offending history and starting to plot how offenders in the UK move between sort of geographical areas, but also offence types, to look at this kind of what I've termed sort of flexible illicit entrepreneurialism in the past. So how they're able to move their business models across offence types, not just targeting different types of items, but also different types of criminality. And then looking at the kind of spread of criminals through rural crime types, but also crime types that stray beyond the kind of things that we would deem to be rural. So what we've found in this project is that we see significant numbers of people that are involved in sort of wider forms of violence, serious organised inquisitive crime, drug dealing, county lines drug dealing, also stray into the sort of rural crime problem, and just trying to kind of map that and trying to kind of build a case for the seriousness of the offenders that are involved in this, because I think sometimes people think rural crime is like a really minor issue and it's not taken very seriously. But when you start to look at the calibre of the people that are involved, you realise that that's really not the case. So that's where I am in terms of rural crime at the moment. I've kind of strayed away from that recently, and I'm looking at a project for the Home Office on sort of wider acquisitive crime types. But I'm hoping to get back into another rural crime project sort of in the summer. One of the major things that came up in my research is that there are some simple solutions to reduce crime, not to eliminate it, but just to reduce it and to make it more difficult for offenders to steal plant and agricultural machinery and vehicles. And those simple steps are not being taken. And the reason that they're not being taken is because of commercial interests. So the first element of that problem isn't specific to the UK, it's a global problem in the sense that particular areas of the market of agricultural vehicles and particular brands are not adopting basic forms of technology which would make theft much more difficult. So we're talking here about sort of modern key technology, immobilization, all of that kind of thing. And the reason that we believe that this isn't being taken up is because for every quad bike that's stolen or every piece of equipment that's stolen, it has to be replaced. So theft ultimately actually drives business. And the reason I feel confident in saying that is because I've spoken to manufacturers in my research, because the first project around plant and ag theft picked up all of these issues with the manufacturers. And one of the major quad bike manufacturers actually said to me that if you address these issues too thoroughly, you will eventually cannibalize your sales because there's such a significant amount of sales catered for through the theft market. So that's the first element of it, because it would be easy for manufacturers to adopt technology that has been adopted elsewhere, not only in the ag market, but in the wider vehicle market, and has been proven to reduce theft. So in relation to sort of JCB's adoption of key technology or immobilization in the wider car market, all of this would serve to make it much more difficult for thieves to take vehicles. And then in the UK, I don't think this is a specific problem in the UK, but I don't think this is quite as universal as the first element. We have an issue around the insurance of these vehicles as well, in the sense that if farmers were to leave their keys in a quad bike, they're still having their insurance premium paid out. So the problem is that the owners of these vehicles aren't actually encouraged to take basic steps to securing their own machinery. And in the discussions that we've held between the manufacturers, the insurers, and groups like the NFU, the National Farmers Union, the manufacturers have actually stated very clearly that they are unwilling to make the changes to technology around immobilisation and so on and so forth until the insurers take those steps towards more stringent insurance policies through mandating the removal of keys overnight and so on and so forth. So we have a situation in which commercial companies are unwilling to take steps that are basic and reasonable to prevent theft only for commercial interest. And to me, that seems incredibly wrong. And if I had a magic wand, then that would be the first thing that I would change, to actually make it imperative for companies to take the smallest steps towards preventing theft rather than pursuing their own commercial interests.